Welcome. Thank you for joining us on today's webinar, hosted by the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations. My name is Victor Trinidad with NCPMI. This webinar is part of the Within the Framework webinar series and presented by Jackie Joseph, Aniva Lumpkins, Ben Reapy, Megan Vonder Emts, Julia Sales. Thank you very much, and please proceed.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Jackie Joseph, one of the hosts of For the Next Hour, and I'm also a team member on NCPMI. And we are so excited to have you here today, whether you're with us today or maybe you're watching this webinar sometime in the future. But we have a lot planned today, so I'm going to pass it over to Aniva, who will introduce herself and let you know what that plan is today. And then she'll also get us started talking about family belonging in the pyramid model.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Hi, everyone. As Jackie said, my name is Aniva Lumpkins. I am one of the NCPMI fellows. I also am one of the supervisors for school psychologists in Palm Beach County. I have the distinct pleasure of also being able to mention that we do have a few other presenters who will be speaking today, but they're going to actually take some time to introduce themselves as they're transitioning to their sections of the presentation. I want to just also note that we have Ashley here with us today, and she's going to be doing a great job of monitoring our chat. Ashley's one of our NCPMI family members. So please feel free to use the chat feature to pose any questions as they arise. Now, as we transition, just in case this is your first time and actually hearing about the pyramid model, I'd like to take a moment here to just offer a little bit of context for you. So the pyramid model is short for pyramid model for supporting social emotional competence in infants and young children. It's a framework, and it's considered to be an evidence-based practice that actually promotes the social, emotional, and behavioral development of young children ages birth to 5. It's a tiered approach, and at every tier you'll see practitioners and programs really work strongly with families in a partnership to promote their child's social and emotional competence. And actually, today's webinar is going to focus on these family partnerships in the context of family belonging. As we transition to the next slide, I want to just be able to walk us through what our distinct plan is for the day. Okay. Before saying that, I want to note that this webinar is brought to you by the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations. And our sincere hope is that this webinar might actually be one that you'd be able to relate to, one that you can reference moving forward and be inspired by, such that you might be able to engage more with the topic of family belonging. One in which we hope might remind you that we want to promote the voices and choices of families and their partnerships with early care and education providers. We also hope that we're able to gain a bit of your feedback, and that feedback might guide us throughout our planning process so that we're able to integrate all of your information into future sessions. We hope that these webinars really provide a great space for you as providers, and a place also where you're able to connect with families and share knowledge and stories, as we know that this is such an important topic. So we welcome any ideas that you might have, any questions that you have, again, in the chat, and we'll be able to respond to those as time permits. So let's get started with our plan for today. We're going to begin by exploring family belonging. We hope to increase your understanding of what it is, how it connects with family engagement, and why it's so important in building long-lasting partnerships that truly do support children and their families. And then you're going to see we're going to end today's session by sharing engaging ways to actually promote family belonging by sharing 3 new pyramid model resources. So let's pause here a bit. We'd like to ask that you think a little bit about a time where you were with your family, your current family now, or during your own childhood. Can you recall a specific moment where your family felt a sense of belonging? Think a little bit about what community or group might have been involved. And then also think a little about what type of activities you might have engaged in, or events or interactions that truly did make you feel that sense of belonging. I notice a few things that might have come through the chat, and so we will kind of ponder that and work through that a little bit later today. I know that as I think back a little bit about my family and those things that made me belong, you're going to see we're going to touch on a number of those things, a sense of community, a sense of being heard. And so as we transition to the next slide, we want you to keep these salient thoughts present with you. And as we work forward, you're going to see we're going to share a little bit about how important those feelings, that sense of belonging, how that really links to the relationships and the bonds that guide the connectedness as well as the growth for your children as you're working with families in partnership. I'm going to hand it over to Jackie, who's going to actually share quite a bit about the thoughts around family belonging.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. What a wonderful introduction to the topic and to everything that we'll chat about today. And I really love that you highlighted that we want this to be a learning experience with everyone who's here or watching it. So we really do look forward to the ideas and information that you have to share. And we absolutely acknowledge that all of us on this webinar today are members of the team here at NCPMI. And hopefully this will be a valuable experience and we can offer more webinars that really offer opportunities for other programs or providers and families themselves to talk about this important topic of family belonging. And when we first started planning this webinar, we were thinking actually about talking about collective empowerment. And this table that you see on the slide here visually represents our goal for today. So we hope to create an opportunity for all of us to think more intentionally about family partnerships. And we invite you to help us think about the ways that we can create spaces of belonging with families, where families and children and providers and the program and community members create experiences of belonging together, which benefits everyone more than it would if one group was creating opportunities for another group, right? Sometimes we tend to think about it as though programs and practitioners create a sense of belonging for families. But what we really encourage you to think about today is how we create spaces of belonging together. And the other thing that this table really shows is that historically, helping professionals tended to power over families, acting as experts who knew what was best for families. And then we moved to a space where we started acknowledging the importance of family centeredness. And now we're moving to advance this idea of powering with families to an approach really that focuses on powering through partnerships with families. And so an approach that considers the entire ecological context of the child and the family and the community, which creates opportunities and resources that we wouldn't be able to achieve if we were acting, in separation with or from one another. And we really do, as we were talking about this slide, actually, just a few days ago when we were talking about this webinar, we want to acknowledge that it is likely that depending on the family, the situation, the context, that you might be working across any of these types of power at various times, right? Maybe even because of the requirements of the system that you work in. And so this is not a static context or situation. You'll likely transition fluidly across these types of power. And we hope that our discussion today helps you reflect on where you might have opportunities to develop relationships with families that enable you to create a mutual sense of belonging with one another, and the kind of partnerships that lead to more equitable outcomes in children's well-being and family quality of life, and genuinely even in the joy of providers and the success that we experience as people who get to partner with families and have the honor of caring for and educating young children. So that's our hope for today as we talk about family belonging. And the other thing that we wanted to mention is that in a minute, we'll introduce a framework for family belonging to help us establish a common understanding before Ben and Julia and Megan will share some new exciting resources that we're really proud of. But before we dive in, we do want to acknowledge that while we can't cover every critical consideration, that it takes to really authentically partner with families in 1 hour, the resources and approaches and practices that we will share and discuss today should be rooted in best practices and in the values of our field. And so here are just a few of those key values and practices that we wanted to explicitly acknowledge before we jump into everything we have planned to cover today. So we do need to be aware of the positionality of ourselves as programs or as individuals or as providers or even as teams of people working in programs. And we need to be aware that there is an inherent imbalance in terms of power between professionals and families or programs and families. So it's important to acknowledge that, understand that, and act in ways that represent that, we are acknowledging that, and what can we do to make that power dynamic more equitable. It's also important to ensure that our approaches and practices are culturally responsive, sustaining, and trauma-informed. And we want to emphasize too that equity is a core value of NCPMI. So we need to consider implications for families who may not experience belonging. The Children's Equity Project, they frame equity around access, experiences, and outcomes. And today we'll ground what we're talking about in a framework that we hope will support your ability to promote every family's experience of belonging. And also inclusion is a strong value of our center. And that means that as we work to co-create spaces of belonging with and by families, it is, in line with this value that we do believe that every young child has the right to be cared for and educated in the same settings they would be, that they would be in if they did not have a disability. And we really do believe that the belonging framework and the resources that we'll share today will help us live into these values. So without further delay, I will get us into starting to talk about family belonging in the pyramid model. So there are a number of frameworks or theories, practices that promote how we can create spaces of belonging with families. And today we're anchoring our discussion in the 10 dimensions of belonging that we've adapted from Carter's work. And these 10 dimensions were developed in surveys with more than 500 teens with intellectual disabilities and their families, which we think is really important. And we've chosen to center our discussion today in these dimensions because starting with the experiences and the perspectives of individuals who are often the least likely to experience belonging helps us ensure that we're broadly removing barriers and we're making choices that really do universally promote the likelihood that every individual and every family will experience belonging. And so we'll chat, Aniva and I will chat through each one of these dimensions a bit more briefly here in a moment. But the other thing we wanted to mention or emphasize is that belonging is mutual. So as we talk through this, we're really trying to do our best to discuss these concepts in regard to how programs and providers can think about beginning to collaborate with families to create spaces that promote belonging. And because, again, we only have an hour today, it may seem like we're implying that providers create spaces of belonging for families, but that's really not our intention. Just reiterating that again. And spaces that promote a sense of belonging for everyone are created by everyone in them. So families experience belonging when they've been an equitable partner in creating that, right? And we experience belonging as we create belonging for others with us. So there's really like a mutual reciprocal relationship there to truly belong. So as the other thing is, as we talk about each dimension, if certain ideas or practices that you use that you believe align with the dimension that we're talking about, we would love it if you would share them in the chat. We won't be able to read out every one, but my hope is to find some way to compile the ideas or the information or resources that you're sharing and find a way to share them more broadly, like maybe on social media, or something like that. So please do, share all of your wonderful ideas and learnings with us today as we share some of our thoughts and ideas with you.
Thank you, Jackie. That was perfect. I love that you spoke a little bit about just the reciprocal relationship there. That is really salient throughout these dimensions that we're going to be speaking about. So I'm going to dive right in. We're going to talk about one of the first dimensions, which is being present. We asked that question, how might we be able to determine if families are present? And that's really the question of, are all families here and are all families showing up? Who is here with us? Who are we able to engage with in this partnership? And if not, then we might actually venture to ask that question, what can we do to make it easier for them to do so, for them to show up and to be present and engaged? All the dimensions, as Jackie indicated, really are interconnected, and they really do work to build on one another, with each one really requiring the more foundational dimensions to be achieved. And so being present is really an essential requirement. It's not enough to experience, but it's not enough to truly experience belonging in itself. We want to be sure that we're able to promote the presence of families in every way possible. And that might mean, for example, actually ensuring that they can come and that they can join in things that are being experienced by the full school community or the actual program community. We might ensure, for example, that we offer times that actually are convenient and conducive to different schedules of our families and that actually work for them. And that in creating that, we might then create a specific space that's accessible for all, for us to be able to work in partnership with them, and then for them to also have that ability to actually be present and engaged. And that we want to be sure that we're working to eliminate any barriers that there may be in them being able to actually show up, be present, and be engaged in that community gathering. We also want to be sure that families have that feeling of needing to be involved. And to the extent that they know that we need them, as Jackie indicated before, but that they also in ways find within this relationship true value in working in partnership with us. And so the activities that we might engage in, the routines, the events, the different rituals that we might ensure are within our programs, and that they're taking place routinely and consistently, and that it is truly a shared space. We might be offering multiple ways to engage that are varied and that actually do truly meet the needs of our families as well. And in such a way that they're able to actually contribute to the community and identify what those ways might actually be. So they might have a voice. They might be able to share with us in what ways they might feel valued and truly seen and being present. With all of these dimensions, we're sure you'll have some of your own examples. So please feel free. We will be monitoring the chat. So feel free to discuss those within the chat today. I'm going to transition us over to the next dimension, which looks at being invited. Okay. The second dimension of belonging is one in where we are actively seeking out families. And we want to ask questions such as, are we actively seeking out our families and their presence? And is everyone encouraging it? Meaning everyone that from the moment they walk in the door of the program, is there someone who's has an inviting and a welcoming sense? Are our spaces and programs and communities such a place that it's explicitly expressed that we do value and we desire to partner with our families? That in its own sense really does create that sense of invitation, being welcomed in. And inviting families, I want to pause and just say, really does require effort. right? I'm sure we can relate to that. Making sure that everybody feels invited, welcoming them from the moment they step into that door, into that place. It's something we have to be quite intentional about, right? We want to be sure that we're seeking our families out in that partnership and that we're extending the invitation in such a way that there's a sense of authenticity in that interaction. So it can be as simple as a warm smile at the door, welcoming eye, a listening ear. All of those things that we know are so essential to connection are things that we want to ensure are in place to create that inviting environment in such a way that they would want to then engage with us and be involved. And of course, that they relish in the care that we're providing as well as the education that's being provided within the space. And it's a meaningful interaction then that again, we are there for them and that they know too that there may be times where we would need them to be there for us. And moving on to the third dimension, welcomed. Okay, when we think of the word welcome, what are we thinking about, right? What does that word truly mean to us? So when families are part of our communities, we need to ensure that they know they're welcomed unconditionally. Now, that's kind of a bit of a big word, right? Unconditionally. What does that mean? That might mean for us then that no matter what might be going on in that moment, no matter what they're experiencing in that time, we are there for them and they're welcomed and they're a necessary partner for us to find success. Okay. So we might ask then, are families received by us and by one another with warmth, with friendliness? And again, that authenticity is so important, right? So every family should experience that same level of friendliness, no matter what might be going on in that interaction, as well as that dynamic that might be at place in the moment. We should know every family's names. We should make sure that we've had opportunities to have conversations with them and that there's that authentic interest in what's happening in real time in their family and in their daily lives, right? And how they might be able to have an established means of communication, not only with us at the front, but throughout the whole program, right? Families really should know that we notice when there's something that's going on and if they're not present, right? We spoke about with the other dimensions how important that being present is. So if for some moment there's a moment in time where they're not present, we should notice that and they should know that they're missed during that time. And if they haven't been there for a while, think a little bit about what might we do to re-engage them and reconnect with them so that they're engaged and invited back into the process. And because we've reached out to find out why they're missing, we might be able to, again, establish a stronger bond as well as a level of connection. That really takes us into our next dimension of being known. So the fourth dimension of family belonging is to be known. We can reflect on a question such as, are families seen as unique systems recognized by their strengths, and are they appreciated truly for who they are? Okay, that builds on the sense that we want to be sure that there is a real foundational relationship that's there so that for them to know and to understand, as well as for us to know and understand truly what might exist within that family structure, wholly and completely. And that really is key then to building on other relationships, as well as building levels of trust that then might create those opportunities for us to help them grow, as well as connect with the resources being provided. And so you'll see that there's going to be a survey that's going to be shared a little bit later that's going to talk about that level of importance where we're able to gain some true understanding, good, solid information that'll help us in ensuring that we know exactly what's going on with our families and know those key things. It's important to remember that knowing families comes with lots of authentic interactions that occur over time. And you'll see that Megan's going to help us better understand that a little bit later. Families really do need these regular interactions that are authentic, as I mentioned before, so that we're able to dive a little bit deeper, much deeper than just maybe a first name, or knowing that the family just went on a great big trip, or that they're experiencing something in the moment that they might need some help in navigating. We want to make sure that there's that depth to that relationship. And it's because all of this that we're able to really grow and be at our very best together, especially for those that we're supporting and those with whom their child are, of course, central to our care systems. Moving on to the fifth dimension, we want to make sure that our families feel accepted. And a question that we might ponder in considering that is, are families embraced without condition and viewed truly as equal partners? Do they feel as though they have as much to say and what they have to say is as valued as well as rich as what we as professionals have to offer them? To be accepted truly does mean that a family's embraced without any condition at all. They don't have to be anything. They don't have to do or be X, Y, and Z to really feel a sense of belonging within our space. Okay. We should do and say the types of things that show them that they truly are equals in that partnership. Again, valuing what they have to say, knowing that they themselves are experts, just as we offer levels of expertise. Not every family may feel quite comfortable actually in serving in that role. And so it's important that, again, we go that extra step in ensuring that they're involved and they're as involved as others. Now, that may not be reflected in the very same way. And so we want to really be in tune to what that level of involvement looks like. No family, as we know, is the same. And as the families continue to kind of grow, and we're able to learn a little bit about their culture, as was noted before, and what levels of engagement they're comfortable with, that of course will guide our process. It's so important that we work with families in tandem in that way, and we can help them in seeing and knowing a bit more about the overall process. Our communities truly are better because of the fact that we invite families in this space and we ensure they feel that level of acceptance. I'm going to hand it back over to Jackie, who's going to take us into our next dimension.
So thank you for that. The next dimension, or the sixth dimension of belonging, is really covers the fact that families need to be, and Aniva, you have said all of this so well already too, that they really need to be involved in their programs and in the environments where their children are cared for and educated. So for this dimension, we might ask, are families actively involved in their children's development and in the program community? Being involved really highlights the importance of family engagement and reciprocity. Engaging families does go beyond offering a list of opportunities for them to sign up for. While this could be a strategy that may work in some communities, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with it at all, because offering opportunities for families to be engaged is a great way to really start, involving them in the community. But a way to amplify that practice could be to involve families in deciding what are those opportunities that they could participate in, and what might be the best way to have them decide how and when and who is able to participate in those opportunities. One of my friends, she had to take time off work to log on and sign up to volunteer in her son's kindergarten classroom, because she really could only volunteer during a certain number of times, and those times tended to fill up more quickly than others. And so she wanted to be a part of his community, but as a childcare provider herself, she struggled with the timing of most of the opportunities that were involved. And so that could have been a chance for, for her program to think about, is there a better way, maybe sending the email in the evening when all of the families were there, or can we expand some of the opportunities that are available for the majority of families to volunteer, or things like that. But families should be involved in as many activities and events as possible, and we should be creating opportunities for them to participate in decisions that impact their children, that are designed in collaboration with them, for all children, and especially for children who have IFSPs and or IEPs, for sure. The next dimension of belonging, and then we're going to get into the resources here really quickly, is supported. And everyone needs support to thrive. And this includes the support that providers can offer to families and families can offer to providers or programs. Collective empowerment means that together with families, we can achieve so much more than we could individually. And this dimension really encourages us to explore the kinds of support that might also help families experience a sense of belonging, whether environmentally or interpersonally or even in the program. And we should ask families these questions, and we should listen authentically when they answer them and plan and implement their ideas with them. When I was working as a childcare administrator, we realized that families needed childcare to be able to attend their conferences. So we made a plan to provide childcare during conferences so that they could come and really talk about their children without having to talk about them in front of them or not come to the conference because they couldn't find childcare. The next dimension of belonging is to be heard. And we really want to be thinking here, are the perspectives of families sought out, listened to, and respected by everyone? To truly belong, our community has to listen to families. And then after listening to them, we need to respond to them, right? We need to respond to their perspectives and their feelings and their experiences. And being heard means that families have choice and control and input over their life and over their child's life. And it also means that they have the opportunity to influence those things. And again, it reminds us that, like Aniva said, we have to remember to invite families. We have to remember to ask families questions that we can listen to their answers to and then respond to the information that they give us. Families also need to be befriended, as we all do, to belong in spaces, because belonging is a relationship-based concept. And to belong means that we have established friendships in the community. And so I really love this 9th dimension of belonging, which is befriended. And a question we can ask is, has the family formed relationships with other families in our community? Friendship is a personal choice, and it is perfectly fine if some families don't have the time or desire to form friendships. But for those families who do, we could consider planning opportunities with them that promote their ability to connect. Because especially as a parent myself, many of us on this call are a parent of a child with a disability. Having a support system and friendships has been crucial for our family's quality of life, and it oftentimes is for most families' quality of life. So in partnership with families, we can create authentic opportunities for them to form friendships, informally or formally in the program. And that will promote their experiences of belonging, because belonging really does involve our kind of doing life or sharing life with people in formalized spaces, but also outside of them too, like at playground meetups or at parties or things like that. So this last dimension of belonging is needed sometimes in some of the work with these 10 dimensions of belonging. It is interchangeable with to be loved, but here we'll talk about to be needed. And belonging really does mean that we are truly needed, that we're valued and recognized by our community in regard to the benefits that we bring to it. And families are dynamic, and we only see part of their experiences. Some families have more time or resources to be deeply involved, and others have different pressures that limit their ability to participate. And this dimension here offers us the reminder to celebrate all of the ways that families contribute and are needed, even if it's simply helping their child wake up in the morning and come to our childcare center. Every single effort adds value to our community. So to ensure that families know that they're needed, we can ask questions like, are they valued as indispensable members of our community? Are they engaged in helping lead our efforts in the environment and in the program? And so this is a nice visual of all of those dimensions again together, and it really shows you how each one builds on the other. That we start by having families more present, and then we're building on that eventually so they know that they're really needed. And when they're experiencing all of these dimensions, that's when we know that they're experiencing belonging. So we'd love you to just take a couple moments here and maybe think about whether or not there's a dimension of belonging that resonated more for you than the other dimensions. And if you'd like to, as we transition into sharing some opportunities and resources, you can let us know in the chat if a certain dimension or of belonging or point that was made resonated more with you than others. And so now we're going to get into sharing 3 resources that we think do promote your ability to ensure that every family who you have the opportunity to partner with truly does experience belonging. And I know that our team has been monitoring some of the chat and some of the questions, and so they'll keep those in mind as they're sharing the resources after as I move into their discussions. And then if we do have any time at the end, we'll get to those as well. So without further ado, I will kick it off to Ben.
Of course. So I would like for us to take just a moment to reflect on a time when you established a really positive, lasting relationship with a family as a result of your efforts to support a child during a behavior support plan process. And looking back, what are some of the actions that you took that you attribute to your success in developing that sense of belonging, and in developing that sense of family engagement, positive family engagement? Okay, Jackie, you can move it forward. So the first resource that we're talking about here is on family voice and choice. And in this resource, we really tried to help encourage families to elevate their voices as the experts of their children before, during, and after a positive behavior support plan meeting. So it kind of reminds me of things that both Aniva and Jackie had said earlier. One, developing a space where families feel like they have a action in the decision-making process, and also helping families to feel like they have more to give, they have more to offer, and they're valued partners in supporting the process. We know that it's an honor to help and improve families' quality of life, or to build on the capacity of families. And whenever we're talking about this tier 3 kinds of behavior support plan process, it's about quality of life. It's not about behavior. It's not about fixing a child or changing a child. It's about improving quality of life. And sometimes that may mean, as organizations, we have to think differently about how we're engaging with families. In this document, we empower families to go into their program and ask questions. And as we were developing it, we realized that not all families are feeling welcome in those positions. And we also realized that they may not feel like they have the space to ask questions. So we want you to consider how you can help move families closer to feeling belonging, as described earlier, and not farther away. We want professionals to consider their stance about families when they're going through this process, because families are feeling they are making themselves really vulnerable by participating in these pieces. And there may be instances where they're especially vulnerable because of past experience. So providers having empathy is really important. And we want folks to feel ready for when families ask questions, and ready to share the celebrations of things that are going well, and to celebrate the work that families are doing to support their children. As we do those things, families they feel more welcomed, they feel more known, they feel like they're involved in the process, they feel like they're heard, and then they know that they're needed. in order to get the best outcomes. So a couple of tough questions that a system may have to ask of itself. One is just that very first aspect of belonging. Are we creating plans without inviting the family? Or are we, the family's invited, but are they showing up with the plan already completed? And as Aniva said, what can we do to make it easier for the families to feel invited, to become engaged in the process? So that's a different way of approaching it. Are we truly listening to the hopes and dreams of the children, the family's hopes and dreams for their children? Are we helping them know how important they are of the support of their children, and how things are going at home is important for us as a program to know? And is the family getting the support they need to engage in this process? So as the most valuable resource and tool for supporting children in the behavioral support process, again, families are so needed. So this tool actually was designed for that bidirectional aspect of that Jackie was talking about, that it's not just we've provided this space and the families are engaged, but rather that this encourages families to ask for the supports to get their needs met, right? So I'm going to go through just 4 examples and we'll move on to the next resource. But 4 examples that are inside of this document. One, we encourage families to ask for the opportunity to connect with other families with similar experiences. There's usually a grandma who's got 5 other kids that are in the program, or a family who's had this experience. And it can be rewarding for the family who's a little nervous and apprehensive about going through this process to have a to learn about some of the pitfalls, to learn about some of the advantages, to learn about some of the things that they can get out of this process. It can be rewarding and instructive. It can help the families to feel welcomed or even befriended by other families. Another suggestion in this document is to ask questions, for the families to ask questions about the process and logistics before the meeting. If you know about where the meeting's going to happen, who's going to be there, it can reduce anxiety for the families, and it can also prevent a missed opportunity. For example, if the family asks, who's going to be translating this for us? That might have been a huge missed opportunity if the program didn't provide someone to be there for that, so they can feel involved, so they can feel heard. Those are important pieces. We encourage families to ask questions that will be asked. What are some of the things you're going to be asked, so they're not blindsided by or surprised by, excuse me for my ableist language, they're not surprised by the questions that are asked. And they also help encourage them to identify some of the questions that they want to ask, so they can show up, they can feel empowered, and they can know how needed they are in the process. And then finally, it's the aftermath. What are some of the processes after the meeting happens, so that families know that the work that is happening in school is being effective, or that the school understands what's working at home, and so they can learn from those things as well. So it's going back and forth, that we learn from each other. And that is the Family Voice and Choice resource that's out there. And we're really excited about it. Other questions that folks had and there is like 20 notes. Are there questions or thoughts that the team has that they would like to share before I move it to Julia? Okay, moving to Julia.
Thanks, Ben. Hi, everyone. I want us to, again, start with a little bit of reflection here. And I think that this whole webinar has been so uplifting and so many great ideas have been shared. And I don't want to be like the Debbie Downer one, but let's just take a second as we're thinking about these great ways that we connect with families, these ideas that are popping into the chat. I also want you to think about some of those conversations that have stuck with you with families that maybe didn't go as expected. Maybe they're those really hard conversations. Maybe they're the conversations that we keep thinking about. Maybe they are the conversations that we go back to and actually make us feel a little nervous or make us feel a little anxious when we have to have a similar conversation with a different family. Maybe there are conversations where there's just misunderstanding that came up. And so I want you to think about that for a second. And again, the reason we're thinking about this is because we think that repair is such an important part of talking about family belonging. I can say, as someone who's worked with many families, there are conversations that pop up and bring me right down to my shame place where I'm like, why did I say it like that? Or, oh, if I could do that conversation over now, knowing what I know, it would look so different. And so we wanted to really get at the idea of repair. And that repair is really meant, we can use it sort of as a preventative. We can use it as something to think about before conversations with families. We can think about it during conversations with families. And we can also really hold it as a tool we can use when conversations feel like there might have been those misunderstandings, or the power dynamic might have been off, or we're feeling a disconnection from families. And so we want to really hold this as an important part of keeping families in that sense of belonging, right? And if we feel like families have drifted out, how are we inviting them back in using the strategy of repair? And so we've broken this resource down into the 4 R's, and the first is recognize, and we're really holding that idea of the power imbalance, and that practitioners inherently have more power than families in terms of some of the decisions that are made about kids. And so the purpose of repair is really, really to center the family's experience. How is that family feeling in this moment? How is that family, have they been harmed? How are we really holding what their experience is? And a lot of the ways that we can do that are, we name it. We say, I understand. We want you to be here. We want you to be involved. I had to make a decision that didn't feel good, or I'm wondering if that decision didn't feel comfortable, right? I've noticed that maybe we're not connecting in the same way that we used to. I'm curious, how are you feeling right now? So how are we really thinking about naming some of those power differentials? How are we asking about families' previous experiences? We know families come to us and may have been harmed or hurt by systems in the past where there wasn't repair. This is a great opportunity to say, hey, we understand that, and there's something we can do about that, right? We can't change the past, but as we think about your experience and your belonging here in our program, we can think about how we move forward. We really want to hold that empathy is at the heart of repair, right? Authenticity and empathy are huge, as well as cultural humility. We want to understand where families are coming from, those experiences, and how are we elevating and helping them to feel we can do hard things and we can still move forward and have a relationship after. We also want to be thinking about reflection. So obviously within repair, it's up to us as practitioners, as programs, as teachers, as all those different roles to really hold this idea of we are engaging in the repair conversation. And so we need to do some self-reflection too. And we need to think about, how am I feeling in this moment? Maybe I got yelled at and I'm feeling a little like, whoa, it feels hard to go in and repair right now. Or maybe I'm feeling embarrassed, or maybe I'm feeling uncomfortable. How are we recognizing those feelings? How are we reflecting to think about our own previous experiences that may have been highlighted and may impact how we interact with families, and thinking about the strategies that really feel helpful for us to do that reflection, recognizing that when we're able to do that, we're really able to show up in a place where we can make and strengthen connections with families. And so this resource has a lot of different examples of strategies you can use under each of the R's. I'm going to keep moving right along to the 3rd R, which is to regulate. And that's, again, really goes hand in hand with reflection. When we are able to reflect and regulate, we're able to have strong relationships. And so our regulation piece is really to think about what do I need to do to regulate myself before, during, and after that conversation? What are those strategies that are unique to me that are going to help me be present and engaged in this conversation, that are going to help me to be that empathetic person and that restoring and repair force within this family connection? And then last but not least, when we put all of our R's together, that's really how we're thinking about repairing. And we want to recognize, again, in this resource that's coming soon, we have lots of different sentence starters about how we start that repair conversation, because it can feel uncomfortable. Some of us may not have experienced repair. Some of us may not have had authentic apologies when things haven't gone well. And so repair is a skill that we're all learning and practicing. And we just wanted to elevate and highlight what an important skill it is in the process. We all make mistakes. Things don't always go perfectly how we want them to, and we don't have to sit with that. There's something we can do about it. And we know that when we are able to acknowledge when things haven't gone quite how we wanted them to, when we can acknowledge that hurt or harm that may have been caused, or those feelings that may have been elicited because of this interaction, we're actually able to show up and connect more deeply after. We're able to really think about that authentic experience that we've had with that family, and ultimately we're able to have those stronger relationships. So I'm going to go ahead, unless there's any questions, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Megan.
I think there is a question, Julia, but I wonder if we pass it to Megan, and then if we have time, we can go back, because I do know that the question that was asked is covered in the resource too. So
sounds great.
So, hi everyone. I'm gonna end us today on our last resource that we think really promotes the sense of belonging in programs, and it feels a little different because it's surveys. But surveys are just one part of continuous improvement. So we want you to reflect on how we can establish feedback loop. So we've talked about this bi-directional communication. Ben talked about it. Aniva and Jackie talked about it to be important. We want to establish these feedback loops where families can see their input in the program, where they get a sense of belonging and partnership. So a family survey, this is our newest resource, but I kind of want to set the context quickly about how we can use a family survey in our pyramid model work to help not just collect information. And so that is, a survey is a way of collecting information that you hope represents the view of the community or group. And that really is, we want to know about how families perceive, what is their take on how things are happening in the program around all of the things that we've been talking about today. And we've talked a lot about in our family engagement group that sometimes families, they're going to express themselves in ways and freely share information that we want to know. And that is a way of gathering information as well. But not all families might feel comfortable or have the ability to express themselves or share important information with you. And you'll never know the answer to a question unless you ask it. And so the family survey really is a way to collect information so that families feel heard, they feel invited. So we're going to invite families to complete a survey. We're going to authentically listen to their and take in the information that they've shared so that they have an opportunity to have influence over the environment, the program, and the community that their children are learning in. When families share that information, we have to trust them, and like they know themselves and their children more than we do. And so that we really are helping them feel heard and valued, and that we're taking that information, that data, and really looking at how can we work together. And so I think of that term, all those things that help families feel supported. Like, you're authentically listening to me, and we're going to work together to make something different or do something differently in our program because of what families shared. If you go to the next slide, Jackie. So talk about hot off the press. This is a resource that was just completed. It is on NCPMI as of today. So we just want to briefly orient you to the sample family survey. And it really is a sample of items that your programs can critically review to create a survey, develop a survey that fits the context, the culture, the values of your program, and can get the information that you are seeking. So the kind of first 2 pages of this resource really cover tips and ideas for how you as a program can take this and can customize the survey to think, okay, what's the purpose? What do we want to know in our program? What do we want to know more about? And so once I know the purpose, once I have that, I can review the sample survey items. So there's 27 sample survey items that cover a range of things about pyramid model implementation. So there's the things about program-wide implementation, classroom-wide implementation, but there's also items that reflect family belonging. So some of the questions are, I feel they're not questions, items, correct myself. I feel welcome in the program. Program staff greets my child by name. Program staff greets me by name. So if we want to get this information about, do families have that sense of belonging with us, that we can use some of these survey items to create a space for families to share this information, and we can use this information to partner with them. And just a little, if you go to the next slide, we do this really quickly. Surveys are just one way that we can collect information from families. And so we don't want to place an overvalue on the use of a survey over our conversations with families. But I want to share a great resource, and Ashley just popped it into the chat. It is from the University of Kansas, and it is a community toolbox. And it has some fantastic resources on kind of determining if a survey is the best approach for your program. And if you can investigate the resources that you do have access to, there are many other ways to connect with families and get information. Things like focus group listening sessions, all of those things that require kind of careful guidance and adherence to protocols in a very specific process. But this is a great resource that kind of connects you to learning more about the surveys, if that's something that your program or you and your colleagues have not considered using in terms of collecting information from families on pyramid model implementation. We just encourage you to wonder and ask questions and to use some of these resources to help build, continue building that sense of belonging in communities with families.
Thank you so much, Megan. What amazing resources. We hope that you all, I've seen in the chat such positive feedback. We're so excited to be able to hear from you all, not only in the chat today, but also moving forward as to how you're experiencing use of these resources, and if you have any feedback and ways that we might continue to improve the resources that we share, please continue to share that in the chat. I also want to take a moment to just provide you all with an invitation. We invite you to identify one idea that emerged today for you as we were discussing these so important things as we talk about family belonging. Think about those ways that you would like to incorporate the things that we've shared in your actual day-to-day work. We ask that you write it down. Maybe you'll type it out or take a picture just of this slide as we're leaving you today, so that you might be able to reflect a little bit more. Make this mental note. Whatever works best for you, we hope that we've touched your hearts in some way today, such that you're thinking and considering that partnership, that reciprocal relationship with the families that you're working with day to day. If you feel up to it, please consider sharing it in the chat. We'd love to be able to review it as we move to close today's webinar. I'd like to just point out in the next slide that I believe we've done a pretty good job in responding to questions that were posed throughout today's session. However, if you have a burning question, please feel free to drop it in the Q&A chat. such that we might be able to address it. I believe we're running close to time, however. And so I want to thank you on behalf of all of our presenters with NCPMI. It's been a pleasure to spend this time with you. I'm going to hand it over to our session's host, unless others have anything else they'd like to cover or share.
All right. Thank you very much to all of our panelists for their wonderful insights. Your feedback is very important to the work that we do. Please remember to provide your feedback on this webinar with our post-webinar survey, which will be coming to you via email within a few hours. If you don't receive your email after several hours, or if you're viewing this webinar as a recording, you can also access the survey and certificate of attendance by typing the web address shown on this slide into your internet browser. Your certificate of attendance will appear once you submit the survey. We invite you to visit our website, challengingbehavior.org, to sign up for our upcoming webinars, access recordings, download pyramid model resources, and more. Thank you to our funder for making this webinar possible. This concludes our webinar. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day.